So welcome to my first thoughts on Cyberpunk 2077, one of the most hyped up games in video gaming history. Now, this is a game that has been delayed multiple times, it's been in the works for years, the build-up has been extraordinary, and I have been brought into that build-up. I've been brought into that hype, and the reason why is I'm a big fan of Cyberpunk. You know, when I was first introduced to it in 1982 when my dad took me to see Blade Runner in the theater. I was 8 years old and it changed my life. It became my favorite movie of all time. Now, the next time I really kind of got into the Cyberpunk world was Shadowrun. I used to play this with my friends as a tabletop game, kind of like a Dungeons & Dragons style of game, set in a cyberpunk universe. And I fell in love with this. I thought it was absolutely amazing. And little did I know there was another tabletop game called Cyberpunk. Never heard of that game back then. But anyways, that is what this entire game is based on, is a tabletop role-playing game. Now, this game is available on every system. It's available on PC, but I personally played it on the PS5. I also have the special edition ordered. It should be arriving sometime next week. I'm kind of excited to get that. I think I pre-ordered that back in June 2019 now. Now, there's a lot to say about this game going in because it is so overhyped. But let's start at the beginning of the overall aesthetics of the game, the look of the game. For me, heavily inspired by Blade Runner, a bit of Shadowrun in there. Obviously, it's based on its own tabletop game, but there's also a little bit of Battle Angel in there. And also, strangely, I'm gonna say, Rand Xerox, for anybody who remembers that old heavy metal cereal back in the day. It all takes place in Night City. And here's where I get to kind of really talk about the game itself, is that the city itself is a marvel. It really is. They've really nailed the world building here. Like from the car designs to the characters, when you're walking around, you really feel that you're in a cyberpunk world, something out of Blade Runner. And I was absolutely mesmerized by this. And it's the little moments that get me. I'm going into the elevator to go to my apartment, and all of a sudden I'm just kind of sitting there waiting. I'm not even pressing the button to go up, and I'm watching the news on a screen in the elevator, and it's so fascinating, and I'm finding out a little bit more about the world just from this small interaction of something I could have just like turned around and not even watched. But I'm enjoying the world in small bits from something as simple as that. It really feels like a lived-in future world that you could live in, that this feels very, very real. I remember just driving with one of the characters in the game, and I just look over at him as he's talking, as we're just casually doing this drive, and I'm like, this looks so good, I can't believe it. It's like, I feel like I'm a part of this. I'm just sitting in the passenger side as he's driving, and I'm looking out the window at the city and the characters, and there's like cop battles and things like that. Sometimes I've gotten a part of that as well. I jumped out of the car and would just go into these big battles with cops versus like punks in the city. I join the cop side, I just kill these guys, and then I loot their weapons. And then I'm back on to doing whatever I want to do. So you can't talk about the city here without talking about the graphics. How are they? There at times are mesmerizing to look around at the city and to say, I can go over there. Yes, it's got that very Grand Theft Auto style of gameplay where you can drive around the city, jump out of the car, but then you go into first person. So there's a little bit of that. But while you're driving around and you're just looking up at the city, you're like, I can go over there. I can go over there. I can be a part of this. It's cool. And it's just the design of everything that looks so lived in and so realistic that you feel a part of it, and the graphics help there because we have steam coming up through sewers. We have neon glowing lights everywhere. In this dark, evil future, the neon is almost the light of the city, and it really is atmospheric. And when you're walking through on a night, and you just have all these glowing lights, but you're in this dark city, and there's all these punks, and you're like, man, I really feel unnerved. The one thing I did that I thought, for me personally, helped the graphics look a little bit better was I took the grain filter off. So there was a grain filter on. I took that off. It made everything a bit sharper. I personally liked that look a little bit more. Now, are these graphics perfect? We're going to get into bugs and things in a bit because I had a really funny bunch of times with that. But I think for current consoles and the way they are, like say for PS4 and the Xbox One X, I think the graphics are probably the best that have ever been on the system. I think they've really pushed it quite well. But at the same time, playing on a PS5, I'm thinking to myself, because sometimes I'll go up to things that are very low res in the game, and I'm like, I really hope that there's a future update patch to really bring it more alive. But I'm not unhappy. I'm not going, oh my god, this is terrible. This stuff is really good. This stuff is really amazing, and I'm happy about that. But I really would like to see future PS5 and Xbox Series X updates. Obviously, PC is going to look really fantastic and run really well as well with future updates for that. I know there's going to be a lot of free updates coming in the future, so I'm crossing my fingers that we get that. It almost makes me wish that I waited a little bit to get those updates and get the game in a more complete way. And we'll get into that in a little bit when we talk about some of those bug glitches and things that people have been reporting. And oh my god, it's real. It's real. I'm going to get into that in a bit. Let's just talk about music for a second. Kind of get that out of the way. The music is very fitting. It's very atmospheric at the time. So sometimes you'll just be walking through apartment buildings and you'll just hear this bashing beat, this pulsating techno beat. And it feels perfect for the setting that you're in. And sometimes you're just driving around, you can change the radio stations, and you just hear, some rap music, and that's great. That makes you feel very atmospheric as well. Kind of gets you in that intensity that we're about to get into some serious crap at any moment in this city. And you can just change the radio station at any moment as well. But the music is ominous, it's unnerving. Like there's so many moments when I was going back to my apartment again, and I'm walking around a corner, and there's some punks hanging out by my apartment, and I'm like, you don't know. I'm like, are these guys gonna turn on me? I just pull out my gun, and it's also that music that's making me feel that nervousness as I kind of go around the corner, get my gun out. I'm like, okay, everything's good here. I go to my apartment, everything's fine. So I think the music is really working well, almost in a very ambient background sense. Now, I hear if you finish the main game, it can be a shorter experience, 20 plus hours, but there's a lot to do here if you want to delve into it. And that's one thing that I plan on doing the more I play into this game, is delving into all of the systems and all of the things that you can do. Because there's a lot of quests that you can just take on. There's the main story quests, there's side quests, there's quests that happen by accident. As I say before, getting into that fight with the cops versus the punks in the city, joining into that was just a happening. That was happening as I was driving down the street. And there's all sorts of things like that. And there's so many characters to interact with and talk to. There's so many ways to upgrade your character. Oh my lord, is there ever. You can upgrade, obviously, the looks. Obviously, when you make your character to begin with, I was kind of floored at the level of design of designing a character. I was looking at this going, we've come a long way. No matter what anybody says, we've come a long way with character creation and changing the hair and all of that, and just the graphic fidelity of that. While I was making my character, I was like, this is great. I could sit here all day and just have fun designing my character. And you can change later on the clothing of your character, every single piece of your character, hats and shoes and armaments underneath, so much stuff like that. Never mind the weapons. I mean, even back at your base home, you can just fill it with all of your weapons that you collect, and you can collect a lot of weapons in this. I love just picking up a big pink gun and going, what the heck is this? And that's really awesome to find. So you can just do that and build up the weapons as well, plus the implants, the cybernetic implants in the game. You can totally enhance your character in multiple ways. I'm sure people are going to do entire videos on how to really do that the right way or the wrong way and all that. But I really feel with this style of game, it's really like a Skyrim or a Witcher's, that you really have that freedom to play the game the way you want to play it. So if you want to play on extra hard and go through everything in the game, you're going to have a long experience. Or if you just want an easy experience, pick easy. Just go through the main storyline and go, I'm done, I'm out. There's a lot of different ways to play it. There's a lot of different ways to upgrade your character and explore the city at your leisure. And I really like it. I gotta say, I really like it. And here's the thing before I get into all the bugs and all that. Are you gonna enjoy this game? Is this game for you? You gotta ask yourself something. Do you like Cyberpunk? Are you a fan of those kind of worlds? If the answer is yes, you'll feel very at home here. If you're like, nah, I don't really think so, I'm not really a part of that, I like more fantasy stuff, this game is not for you. This game is definitely for me. I was playing it, I had a really late night session with the game last night. That's why I'm a little tired today, but I don't regret staying up as late as I did last night because I was totally absorbed into the world. And I never wanted to hit skip on any of the cutscenes because they were so well done and so interesting and helping to add to the world building of the overall game. And it added to the experience of being a part of that world. Yes, could you skip everything? Yeah, but I think you're gonna miss a lot. Also, the investigations in the game, oh, that adds a whole other level into it. So there might be like a crime scene and you can rewind time and fast forward time and kind of look for clues. At first I was like, oh my god, this is quite a lot to it, but it's quite simple. It's quite simple. And it's really fun when you finally figure out a certain thing in a section. You're like, oh, it was there, or this was this. And that's kind of the fun bit of rewinding time and fast forwarding it. That's pretty neat. Another thing. So there's a lot more to the game that's like a run and gun. It's a run and gun, yes, but there's so much to do with the action RPG mechanics of it all and the story building and the world building that it's very impressive. It's very impressive. Now, with such an ambitious project comes some follies and some shortcomings for certain. And I think this game has been delayed and delayed, and I think they had a lot of problems behind the scenes, a lot of bugs they were working on, things that were not fleshed out 100%. And so what I had heard, I was reading some reviews and I thought, okay, so there's some bugs in the game, but there's a day one patch. So I did all of that. And so I thought, maybe it's clean sailing for me now. And for the most part it was, but then I would have strange bugs where I would pick up a character and drop them and they would end up upside down in a really weird way. So I was like, oh, well, I can let that one go. That's not a big deal. And then some strange things started to happen as I went down into the wormhole of playing the game more and more. Like the very first time I got into a car, and I didn't have this recorded or anything like that, I was driving down the street and I had to pull up at this building. So I backed up into the front of the building, got out, did all the stuff in there. And later on when I came out, the car was floating off the ground. And I'm like looking at it and I'm like, no, that is floating off the ground. And I'm like, wait a second, John, don't jump to conclusions. This is a cyberpunk city. Maybe it's like a spinner out of Blade Runner because there's flying cars all over the place. Maybe it's floating, it has anti-gravity on it or something like that. And I'm like, maybe, but it wasn't floating when I got out of it. Anyways, so I get into the car and all of a sudden I notice the car's right in the ground. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, right, okay. That's strange. And then I drove away and like nothing had happened. That wasn't an obnoxious one. That was more of a funny one, and there is some funny ones, but I was surprised at the sheer amount of them, and I'm going to get into that as well in a minute. Another thing that happened, hard crash. I was coming out of one section, I'm talking to a character, I'm really in the moment. I'm really absorbed into the moment because everything that happened before this one scene had built up, and I'm having this conversation, and I'm like, yeah, I know what to do next. This is really the big deal thing. Let's go. And as soon as I'm getting into the storyline a little bit more, boom, it's gone. And I grabbed my phone and took a screenshot before it left the screen because I wasn't recording it. And I'm like, and it was this hard crash, and I had to go back to the beginning. I'm like, man, that kind of took me out of the experience a little bit. And I have to redo it and go back, and I'm like, okay. And that kind of sucks. That's one of those ones that sucks. And all that, and there was just a lot more bugs than I would really like to report on. It's kind of sad. I'm really bummed about that. But listen to this. I believe that they're going to iron all these things out. They're going to work on this game. They're going to work on this game with a lot of free updates and a lot of free things added in the future. That's what they've said. So I believe that they will work these things out eventually. I also think that obviously the game wasn't ready. And what are we at right now? We're at Christmas time 2020. And I think they're like, nope, we can't delay it anymore. We need to bring it out at this Christmas season. We can't delay it any longer. We'll fix it as we go along. That is exactly what happened here. And you know, my thing is, just delay a game a little bit longer. Just push it back a little bit longer. Because it's weird. Like, I'm walking around the city, and I go up to some girl standing there, and I go, hey, blah, blah, blah. She disappears. And I'm like, she's part of the world. Right in the beginning of the game, they must have tested this. They must have seen this. And they were just like, yeah, we'll get it later. And that is one of the unfortunate things about pushing a game out really soon, is sometimes these things happen. And that is the unfortunate thing about Cyberpunk 2077. But that being said, this game is a marvel. I love the world setting. I love the characters. I like the story a lot. I really love the investigations. I love the run and gun. I love building up my character. There's a lot I love in there, right? There's a lot of good stuff in there. Do I wish the graphics were better for PS5? Sure, but that's just a nitpick. The graphics are really good the way they are right now. I can't wait to see the future of Cyberpunk and see what they have in store, because right now what they have done so far is remarkable. It is. The overall game itself is very, very strong. The ambience, the atmosphere is second to none. It is probably the coolest Cyberpunk video game experience I've ever had, next to Snatcher. It's been fun there, but I'm really having a good time. And the bugs are frustrating, but but they're not taking away from me. I'm going back into the other room, and for most of today, going back into the Cyberpunk 2077 universe, because I really like it a lot. So anyways, guys, until next time.